You're going to take a white tissue. The yellow tissue means cheeseburger. You're going to put the bun upside down in the tissue that's upside down. 2 pickles, not 1, not 3. 1 scoop onion, 1 squirt ketchup, 1 squirt mustard. Put the burger on, put the bottom bun on, fold it like this, turn it over so that it doesn't undo itself. Now you do it. The reason that it became so obvious was his next comment was, when you can make 60 of them perfectly in an hour, come find me and I'll teach you something else.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Biz Dev Podcast, the podcast about developing your business. I am David Baxter, your host, and I'm joined, per usual, by Gary Voigt. Hello, Gary. I won't make fun of you today because I'm feeling nice.
Thank you. Yeah, I have anxiety about that every week. So
every week. You know what I have anxiety about? Coming up with a new way to make fun of you. That's what causes me anxiety.
I just like to watch you try and stumble and try and stumble.
When I use the same joke, because I forgot I've done, we've done 130 of these now. That's a lot of different ways to make fun of a person, a single person.
But you usually go for the hair, and I'm out of hair rebuttals. Like, so.
Well, yeah, that's just jealousy talking. I'll be honest.
Hairs, hats.
More importantly, you're covering the hair now. I'm telling you, man, he's hiding his plugs. Anywho, more importantly, we are joined by Bill Harper, who is the founder and CEO. I got him pretty good on that one, of BrandBossHQ. Welcome, Bill.
How are you? I'm actually feeling bad. I don't have any hair plugs or anything to add to the equation. It sounds like you guys have got a good thing going.
He's just jealous because I have lovely locks.
I'm Midwestern.
He's not showing them.
I'm Midwestern, so if you're not giving somebody grief, one of two things is true. Either you don't like them or the jury is still out. That's just the way it is.
That's fair. I like that. I find, depending on where you are in the country, the grief you give, like Northeasterners generally, man, it gets mean. Like,
oh no, it's
not poking fun anymore.
Obscene.
It's just rough. And I don't roll quite that hard, but yeah, it's my favorite thing is, this is totally inside baseball. When we bring a new team member in, and my favorite thing, I've said it a million times on our Slack, I'll just, for no reason, I will ping the entire team and I'll just say, Gary, stop sucking. I do it all the time.
Judging the reactions is how we can tell if they're good culture.
When it is a new teammate who has no idea what's happening, like he just got hired, oh, that is just lovely. They're like, what did I join? And it's just... And it's okay. They've been doing this for like 20 years.
It never gets old. That's the thing. It just never gets old. Yeah. As a Midwesterner, we've taken passive aggressive sarcasm to an art form. So it's, oh, I see you keyed your initials in the side of my car. So you're upset about something or what?
Do we need to talk?
Yeah. I guess we need to talk then.
It's funny you say that. I just watched the new Roadhouse movie with Jake Gyllenhaal last night.
I saw that this weekend.
Don't know about that, man. I'm making a judge's ruling from the parking lot, but that can't go well, right?
It was actually, if you know what this isn't
if you
poetry,
turn off
right?
your brain,
and
you're just like, ooh, look at the fast paced action, then you'll get.
Did you enjoy the original one? Did you ever see the Patrick Swayze?
Enjoy it. I'm from the 80s. I grew up with it. What are you
sure?
How many people
like Shawshank Redemption, Hunt for Red October, and Road? You just don't pass it. You're like, oh, and now I'm here for the next 2 hours. Now I can't.
If you liked the original, you will like this. It's the same kind of. He's a super nice guy. He's not Patrick Swayze. Let's not be honest. He's not Patrick, but he is fun. And what's his name? Conor McGregor is the main bad guy.
That's the part, and he was.
He's just. But
so Gary, you couldn't buy the bad guy.
Well, the thing is, let's just say Conor McGregor's not the greatest actor, so he was just playing himself, and I don't really like him as himself. So yeah,
he just punches.
After about
people.
5 minutes of Conor McGregor,
I don't know if this has anything to do with building business, but it's a hell of a fun conversation.
Well, the reason I brought it up is because it's all good. The reason I brought it up is he's Midwestern, and it's the same kind of thing. He's like super chill all the way until he's not super chill. But that's what made me think of it was he's super polite, but there's a moment. Anyway, all right, let's talk about something real. Tell me about BrandBossHQ. Tell me the story.
So this is the weirdest thing ever. I've owned 4 advertising agencies before BrandBoss, and all of them were traditional center line kind of businesses, 25 million to $500 million client base. That was the bread and butter, and we chased them, and it was very traditional in that respect. And as COVID finally caught our company and we were feeling some of the burn from that, a gentleman who's about 10 years my senior and retired after selling his business, is basically doing the consulting because I don't want to golf all day thing, came to me and said, you should go on TikTok. And I literally laughed him out of the room. I was like, I won't even let my kids on TikTok. Get away from me. I don't want to be on
That's
TikTok.
true.
That's
I
like
won't either.
stupid things. Like, I don't have anything to do with TikTok. No, hard no. And he kept after me about it. And it was like one of those things where finally I turned to him and I was like, why won't you give this up? It's just, I don't want to be on TikTok. So he comes to me and he said, seriously, like I was crying laughing when he said that. He came to me and goes, I'm flying a TikTok star out from Los Angeles. And I literally put my hands on my knees and started crying. I was like, what the hell is a TikTok star? I was like, why would I want to go to this? So he says, no, I'm doing this whole day seminar. I'm bringing in these companies. And I said, who's coming? And then he listed off companies that were 70, 80, 120 million top line revenue. And I was like, how many people are coming from these companies? He's like, full tables, like 8, 10 people a company. I was like, really? So I went to this stupid lunch and I'm watching this guy talk, and he was trying to explain how this all worked. And what I got out of it was that underneath all the like ass shaking dumb stuff that we all see when we first get on the platform, there was something else, some kind of an educational entertainment thing that was underneath it. And when I went to leave, they broke for lunch and I was sneaking out the door, and he comes up and he goes, I want you to look at this room. And there's all these corporations here and there's all this stuff. It's a packed room. He goes, none of them is going to do anything. Be the one guy. Prove to me that it doesn't work. And he picked the right guy. So I sat on it and it like bothered me that I wasn't doing anything. And then I got online and all of a sudden it blew up. It was like 3,000 views, 30,000 views, 300,000 views, 2.5 million views. And people started calling me and saying, will you be on my thing? Will you work with my company? Will you do whatever? But the vast majority of these were businesses that were under about $30 million. So suddenly we had to pivot and make a brand that would work with these smaller organizations that were trying to find a way to scale by leveraging some of the same tools that the larger groups did. So we couldn't come out and put together $250,000, $500,000 packages for them. We had to figure out something that they could do that would be much more bite-sized, much more manageable. So we had to reimagine the entire thing, and thus BrandBoss was born. So sorry for the long diatribe story, but it was like this sort of weird thing that someone stopped me in the hall to do this, and $2+ million net new business later, since April of last year, like it's a real thing. It's a super real thing. So I got to say, I'm a fan of the platform in terms of what it can do to scale a business. And we're not even known yet. Like we're just barely scratching the surface at 100,000 followers. Like we're not big by any stretch of the imagination yet. And we just continue to get momentum.
Now, what type of content did you launch with? Was it educational? Was it advertising education?
Yeah, it was. I refer to it as edutainment, right? The whole thing is, I'm a character anyway, so we've got that to work with. But the whole thing was little Scooby snacks about how marketing and branding work, because people just don't understand it. And they are so tactically driven, and they'll run out and they'll just throw spaghetti at the wall and hope it sticks. And they don't understand why they're not getting the response that they want. And so I literally just started speaking to that. Hey, when you go out, this is what you should be looking for. And this is how to structure it. And this is a good thing. And that's a bad thing. And here's the difference. And here's why. And as I caught a little rhythm to how to keep it under 3 minutes or how to keep it in 1.5 minutes or whatever, the response rates started to go up. And before I knew it, I had a steady stream of people. We made one video that announced BrandBoss. And I went on and I said, hey, I'm starting this new company to help groups that are at this stage. And I had 2 months of calendar invites happen in 2 weeks. Like they just filled my calendar 3 days a week, 12 meetings a day. And it just filled. And it took our breath away. Like we had absolutely no idea that it was going to be that way. We had we were not prepared for it. We were literally like, okay, stop everything, pivot, figure out how this model's going to work. Spent 4 weeks like figuring it all out, getting all the templates, running it through the process, getting the bugs out of it. And then it was time to go and take it to market. And we haven't looked back since.
Man, I'm blown away. One, I hate TikTok, but this is fascinating.
I treat it like it's a cocktail party. I treat it exactly like I would if I was standing in front of somebody at a cocktail party. I try to say something brief and interesting that's educational, that gives them something to be able to see in their own universe. If it's not helpful or useful to them, they're not going to engage.
I find this so fascinating because I can learn. I don't like being the face of Big Pixel, my company, but it's often my role. And so now maybe you really enjoy being the face, and maybe that's a difference. But I get the feeling that you're just doing this because this is where you're finding success, rather than I want to be a big name, right? Which is what most people want when they start doing the social media stuff. Yeah, Alex Hormozy is a guy. He's got 2 million followers on Instagram, and he does a lot of. It's not necessarily marketing, but he does little books and things like that. And he runs a company called acquisition.com, which is ultimately what he makes money off of. He buys little companies and then blows them up using his techniques. But it's really interesting to hear someone who's finding success, because most people, they're using as part of their, like us, like we're not using TikTok specifically, I don't think. Gary does, and Christy do all of our marketing, but we do tons of LinkedIn, and we're about to start little snippets here and there. And I'm curious if we're just doing it wrong in the fact that social media on LinkedIn is great. We've done pretty well with that, but we haven't ventured out into any other. Gary, stop me where I'm wrong here, but
I think the TikTok thing is a different beast. We're just using it as another ancillary channel for the social media content that we already put out. But I think the way that Bill's describing it, if you use the TikTok, I guess your presence there for a specific reason, that seems to resonate a lot better than just using it as another channel to post other social media stuff that you would put anywhere else. So
I find TikTok
maybe
and
we
LinkedIn
should try to leverage that a little bit more.
Yeah, I find TikTok and LinkedIn to be separated at birth a little bit. So LinkedIn is the non-video version of the same edutainment window. So I've got about 20,000 followers on LinkedIn, and it's cerebral there, right? Like the idea is, here's 6 pages on how to do this. Here's an article about this. Here's a video that's specific to something that you could then use as a tool in your toolbox. And I really liked that because I don't like wasting time just watching stuff bounce. That's not doing anything to me. I've got businesses to run. I got things I want to try to achieve. And I just assume that for the people who also feel that way, they don't want to waste their time just watching stuff bounce up and down either. But when I got onto TikTok, what I found was that the bite-sized nugget thing was really great. And as I did some further research in it and found that millennials down are using TikTok in place of Google, it makes more sense to me, right? So all of a sudden now this platform becomes what I refer to as mini mentorship. If you want to make Star Wars exact replicas of Star Wars spaceships, I promise you there's 1,000 hours of exactly how to paint space dust in 3-minute segments on TikTok to teach you every single thing about how to hold the brush or how to anything you want. There's a guy with 1 million followers out there who just unboxes like bolt-on solutions for turbos for old Ford trucks. It's nuts. And this guy has got no lighting, no sound, no nothing. He's Jerry from the Sticks or whatever. I don't remember his name, but he's like Jerry from the Sticks. Like his camera is bad. The lighting is horrendous. It looks like a mustard blob in a mayonnaise background. There's no color to anything. And he'll slam a FedEx box down and be like, this is the A24 B19 for a 68 Ford whatever. And he'll rip it open and go hammer this thing in. And he'll just stand there and talk about it. This is a turbo and how it works. And that's really when the light bulb went off over my head. Because when I looked at that, I was like, okay, now I get where we're going with this. From a B2B standpoint or a how can I make my brand work standpoint, it's suddenly a mini platform for mentorship, and it's really well received here. So it's a small stage to a big audience, and it's amazing. So I can't say enough good about it. I have found it to be incredibly beneficial.
So I'm thinking larger audience, not just me, because although I can nerd out with you alone, just like about Big Pixel and how to use this. But if you are someone who's got a startup or something like that, you just find a niche and start making videos, or is there, because there's a billion of those people, right? And
Yeah.
they're not all finding success. Like what do you think is making your
Or
stuff
what would you
go up?
recommend to your clients as how they can utilize TikTok to elevate
So the
their
first thing is most people just get up and are trying to get attention. Screw attention. Attention's the byproduct of having made a good connection. So I think most people are coming at it the wrong way. It's like starting a business for money. Money is just the byproduct of doing the thing well. So number one, we got to get our priority in line. Number two, how you talk about what you do is incredibly important. The same mechanical structure, the same scaffolding that makes a Nike or a Disney works for startups too. And it's been proven. Dollar Shave Club was nothing. Poopery was nothing. Liquid Death was nothing. And people get this weird fairy tale fantasy, us and them membrane between what that company used to be, which in Phil Knight's case was a guy selling shoes out of the trunk of his car, to what this $46 billion empire is today. And they can't see their path to it. But the fundamentals are the same. If you ask most people, you guys have had people on your show, and I'm not going out on a limb too far here to guess this. You've asked some people, what do you do? And they start droning on for 5 minutes. How long is it going to take for people to lose interest when you can't articulate what it is that you do? But if instead you're able to come back and say, oh, I make brands popular through strategic storytelling. Oh, that's cool. How do you do that? That's exactly it. You're solving a particular pain point. I want my business to be popular. I don't know how to do that. I understand that storytelling is valuable in terms of marketing. How do you put those two things together? Oh, well, let me tell you about it. Most people don't do that. Most people come out and go, yeah, the thing is, and then they give an opinion piece. Your opinion's not relevant yet. Okay, we don't know you yet. We've got to be on here. If I'm going to bother watching you, I want to get something out of it. What's in it for me is true. I am completely irrelevant. I tell my clients this all the time. Gary, you asked the right question. I'm irrelevant. You're irrelevant. You're never going to ask me questions about my business because you don't care. You only care about whether or not I'm a useful tool to you reaching the goal that you have. In other words, I am in service to you. I only exist because you have a need. If I didn't, I would disappear off your radar completely. Doesn't matter if you sell the world's best hammer if what you need is a screwdriver. So the whole thing here is, who are you talking to? What are you saying to them? And how will it benefit them right now? Because if you meet somebody on the street, I promise you, that walks by and says one thing smart, you'll look forward to seeing that person again on the street the next day and hope you run into him again, just on a single encounter. Same thing is true in business. We just don't think to treat it that way. It's just people.
I feel like I'm talking to Yoda, man. I'm just sitting down and absorbing. This is awesome. Because you're right. When you ask people, and that's the same even for me. Hey, what do you do? I usually, even though look at that. He's pulling out his Yoda
Nice.
figurine. Very nice. Now I lost my train of thought. See, Yoda just knocked me over.
See one
But
Yoda and it threw the whole thing up.
I'm just done. I find when I'm in a situation and I'm going to a schmoozer, right? I'm going to a networking event. Someone asking me what I do should be par for the course. And yet I'm almost always surprised by it. I know what I'm going to say, but I never say it like what you just
What are you
said
gonna
about your
say?
business.
What do you say?
Usually,
Yeah.
my usually thing is I run a custom software design and development business. And that's usually where it ends because I know I've got 10 seconds, right? I'm not going to flowery, but
Okay. So
everything
David,
I
why
say-
do you do that? Why do you do that business?
I love helping people create designs and transforming their businesses through technology.
Transform
That's
them
my
how?
shtick.
What's the thing that you give to them? Like, why would they care? Follow the why would they care thread back. When people ask me that, I say to them, I help businesses tell stories so they can grow faster. And they go, how does that work? Because the thing that they don't understand is I want to grow faster and I'm curious about this thing called storytelling. You do something similar, and I don't know what that is yet, but if you back it all the way up to, we help these people do this little simple thing. We just help people spread butter on bread. That's all we do. We just help soap dissolve better in water. That's what we do. Now, the complications of it, we can get into that. But in the long run, if you're a person that needs to spread butter on bread, we might have something to talk about. So you've got to bring it back from the description of what you are to the thing that you solve so that it becomes the beginning of a story. That's the piece that's missing. So if you want, and it's really fun when you do it the first time, because once you realize how to tell that story that way, you'll never be without a story to tell again. But it always comes back to when businesses hire us, really they're hiring us to do one thing. They don't know how to tell a story. They don't know how to promote themselves. They don't know something like fundamental ABC basic. That's what you help them solve for. Then it's a conversation because it's something that they can wrap their head around. If I said we're a strategic branding agency that helps businesses in the 25 to 50 million or $500 million range, people would be like, okay. But there's nothing there for them to grab hold of because it's not relevant to them. But if I say we help grow businesses by teaching them how to tell stories, oh, that's interesting. I didn't even know that growing a business and storytelling were related. Like, how does that work? Or I've never done that. Or I've seen some good stories on a Super Bowl spot. How do you even do that? That's where we want them.
So I get the hook. You've got the hook. You've explained that very well. What I am still confused about is how do you turn that into business? You blew up your calendar. You had 25 people, and then you're saying, okay, a lot of people blew up your calendar. You still were selling to your traditional early on. You're selling to your 25 to $500 million customer, and you didn't
WMH
have
still is. Yeah, BBHQ is
fair.
over on one side. So the other business still does. Yeah.
Fair, but you're just starting out and your calendar blows up, but you're like crazy Oprah's favorite things moment, right? And you have a proposition that you've been selling for years over here for your main business. And now you have 25 salespeople knocking down your door or meetings. How long did it take you to figure out I got to shift? How many business meetings did you drop the ball on that very air quotey? Because you didn't know what you were selling, right? You couldn't sell this. You're going to sell this other thing over here. And they're not.
It was about 5. And it was less about how to talk about it. That part was not really different. It was just smaller. Like I used to describe an apartment building. Now I'm talking about a shack. It was just size.
Sure.
The place where it fell apart was in understanding how I had to use the language to get them to come with me. So the first time that I did it, it was a person that called that was in a really unique space to me, never worked on it ever. And it was a relationship, a woman that did basically millionaire matchmaking, right? Out of Los Angeles. And she called, and I never even charged her because it was such a train wreck. I was trying to apply $50 million business practices to $400,000 a year or $1 million a year, whatever it was, business. And it was like, it just didn't, it didn't make any sense. But I walked away from that experience, and it was one of the last times that happened, because what I realized was that I was asking the wrong questions. I was asking $150 million corporate questions rather than $1.5 million solopreneur questions. And so I just had to pivot where they were. So the conversation very quickly went from what things do you have in place? Where have you been working? What's not working? To tell me about how you sell your business, and tell me about how you're growing, and where are you now, and what are you trying to reach, and what marketing tools have you been using? Fundamental. No assumptions. Okay, you've got a marketing plan, you've got marketing stuff in play, because I can't make those assumptions anymore. I'm not working with a company that, of course, has an entire marketing department and has an AOR and has these other things. So once I figured out how to pivot down to that appropriate level of conversation, which was the thing that was on me to learn how to do, then all of a sudden those conversations flourished very quickly, because it was like, okay, here's what I'm juggling, right? I've got this and this and this and this and this and this. And I'm like, okay, have you tried this thing or this thing? I have, but I have had limited success, or this thing worked really well, but I don't know why I can't replicate it. Okay, so now I'm starting to get into your universe. Let me help you organize these pieces first. And then from there, we'll make a plan. Those larger companies didn't need that same type of organization. They already had it in place. So I was starting too far down the line. Once I got that figured out, then it was like, okay, so we just have to start here instead of there. We got the pieces. What are you calling them? At the larger thing, they're using the same vocabulary. Down here, they don't. Down here, somebody's calling it a spot, and someone's calling it a TV, and someone's calling it a creative, and somebody's calling it a whatever. And I'm like, okay, let's get vocabulary locked in. Once we had that kind of an understanding, it got real easy to start having a proactive conversation. And they were looking for structure first and direction second. as opposed to concept first and execution second, which was the big guys. So once you figured out where it was appropriate to engage and how, the rest of it became pretty straightforward.
So now I'm going to ask you, I think it's a tough question. So you've been selling big boy packages, probably for a pretty premium, big bucks, right? If you're a $300 million company, you can spend some money on marketing. So
Yeah.
you're used to big boy packages and you sold maybe 10 of those a year on a good year, if I were to guess. Now you've got little baby packages and you've got to sell 300 of them. Do you find as a business owner that trade, and I'm not saying trade, but that change is worth it? Because like I could do the same. We build big software packages and those are pretty high dollar, generally speaking. I could pivot at any moment and build $5,000 websites, but I would have to build so many of them. It'd be a beatdown to make the equivalent of. So are you finding that to be stressful? Now you've got 250 clients when you had 10, or
In some ways, yes. And in some ways, no. The most important lesson I ever learned in my life, I learned at my very first job at 15, working as a Whopper flopper at Burger King. And that was how to make a Burger King burger, right? And the guy, Vic, that owned it, God, he hated all of us, brought me in with a spatula in his hand that he was minutes away from whacking me on the head with, which, by the way, I probably deserved. And he was like, hey, I'm going to teach you how to make a hamburger. And like every other idiot, cocky 15-year-old kid, I was like, dude, I made a million hamburgers. I know how to make them. He says, no, you don't. You don't know how to make a Burger King hamburger. You're going to take a white tissue. The yellow tissue means cheeseburger. You're going to put the bun upside down in the tissue that's upside down. 2 pickles, not 1, not 3. 1 scoop onion, 1 squirt ketchup, 1 squirt mustard. Put the burger on, put the bottom bun on, fold it like this, turn it over so that it doesn't undo itself. Now you do it.
I
of
love how
course, I
you
screwed
remember
it up,
that
right?
so many years later.
Yeah. And all these
That's
years
awesome.
later, because the reason that it became so obvious was his next comment was, when you can make 60 of them perfectly in an hour, come find me and I'll teach you something else. And what I didn't realize at the time, of course, as a kid, I was like, God, I was stupid. I can do better than that. But as I grew up and I realized what he was doing, he taught me operational efficiency. What he taught me is that you can't approach small projects the same way. Now, here's a statistic that you might not know. In the United States, at any given time in modern day, there are roughly 41,500 enterprise-sized businesses. That is, companies that are over 250 employees or 300 employees, however they define it. At the same time, there are 32.5 million small and mid-sized businesses that are being completely ignored by everybody, because all the businesses are trying to chase the $10,000, $300,000 projects you referred to, as opposed to figuring it out. If you apply the same logic as the hamburger solution, you can have a single, a double, or a triple. If you want cheese, it's extra. To the way that you manage the smaller pieces of business, they become manageable. Not that they all get the same solution, but they go through the same process. You can't do that same thing up at that large scale. There are too many moving pieces, too many parts. You've got department heads, you've got outside vendor partners, you have relationships that exist, there's too many layers to stack that way. But when you come down to businesses that are under 25 million, it's super easy to be able to walk in and say, this project at $50,000, $70,000, whatever, will satisfy these things in this period of time. It goes through these steps, it results in these deliverables, and you can have it in this period of time. And that allows you to do it at scale. Because now you can hire teams, those teams learn how to do that, those deliverables become predictable, you can predict the model and scale, and the next thing you know, because it has a beginning, a middle, and an end to that first engagement, you're able to do it and replicate it much more quickly. So it's just different in how you do it. It isn't better and it's not worse. It's just different.
Big Pixel builds world-class custom software and amazing apps. Our team of pros puts passion into every one of our projects. Our design-infused development leans heavily on delivering a great experience for our clients and their clients. From startups to enterprises, we can help craft your ideas into real-world products that help your business do better business.
I understand that the operational processes and stuff in order to scale. Now, my question to you was, with taking on all these new clients, the smaller clients, are you pivoting some of your current team to work from the larger scale clients to then spend time on the smaller ones? Or did you actually have to end up adding to your team to just service the smaller clients along with
You
it.
add to the team and you repurpose some and not others. There are efficiencies of scale inside that you can take advantage of. A designer that does logos over here can do logos over there. Account service folks that work on these kinds of businesses are suited to work on those kinds of businesses. So it's just there are additions to it in different ways, but the pacing and the way that organization moves is different than the large scale organization. There are different assumptions, there are different expectations, there are different types of deliverables and different types of ways. It's a different dance, if that makes sense. It's the same story, right? You're taking them through the same process of discovery. We have to figure out what insights we need. We have to figure out which story we have to tell. We have to figure out how to tell it creatively, but we have to tell it on this side this way, and we have to tell it on that side that way. And so it's just figuring out how best to satisfy that.
Do you foresee, and maybe this isn't a fair question, and feel free to tell me, shut up. Do you foresee the TikTok-y business overtaking your existing business? Or do you see them always living in concert?
That, I think, honestly, is more a function of what's happening with the economy than it is anything else. A few years ago, I heard for the very first time, you can't grow my business. It was the very first time I'd ever heard that. Even in '08, we didn't hear that. But the logistics issues that have come as a result of what's happening in Ukraine and China and the seas there, and being able to get, when you compounded that with COVID's impact on docks and being able to process materials and the backlog and backup that had to do with shipping internationally, and with so many companies working internationally to produce products at a lower cost and then shipping them into country, all of that had such a traumatic impact that all of a sudden I was hearing from large scale companies, I can't have you grow me because if you do, I'm going to tick people off. I'm going to lose my client base. So it was a really weird time. So what I see it more as is a balance, right? There are going to be times, and what's happened, right? If you watch what's happened in corporations where they had to get lean and then they blew up, and then they got lean and they blew up. And we've had that super accelerated over the last 3.5 years as people responded to COVID and then thought COVID was over and then brought everybody back and then realized that logistically they couldn't grow. And then they did this weird stutter thing. More people left and started to develop their own concepts. They were like, forget that. I'm not going to be accordioned in and out of businesses anymore. I'm just going to start my own thing. And so all of a sudden you have all these smaller businesses that are desperate to understand how to align sales and marketing efforts into something that's a growth machine. So I see it as a teeter-totter really of need. One will be high on one side and then one will be high on another. This is just the first time that we've ever been in a position where we can take advantage of both. And that's really the big lesson that I learned. And once I realized that there were other models that we haven't yet taken advantage of that will scale us even further, because there are independence models, there are education models, there are other things. Like once I got out of, we're a traditional agency that does things this way, and you actually pivot and consider a different model, all of a sudden the realm for possible expansion into new revenue streams, like your visionary light goes off like 1,000 watts, and you're just like, okay, I can do it this way and that way and this way and that way. And now I just need time and teams to be able to make that happen. But the opportunity is significant.
I love it.
We usually wrap up with one question with every guest that we have on. And seeing that you work with a lot of startups, you're probably in a good position to answer this. What would you give as your top 3 pieces of advice for any new startup, business, or entrepreneur?
Number 1, success through simplicity. I promise you that if you are a startup company, you are thinking way more complicated than you need to be in terms of both your messaging and your execution. And I see that every day. So businesses are like thinking, I came out of the corporate world and they operated at this level and they delivered at this level. And that's not necessary when you're at a smaller level starting off. Simplifying that down is going to be helpful. Number 2, understand what the real problem is that you're selling. Lots of businesses go out wanting to explain how the way that they made the greatest hammer in the world makes hammers better. but nobody buys a hammer because the hammer is better. They buy a hammer because they need to hang a picture on the wall and they need something to drive the nail in. Understanding what problem you're really solving will get you closer to being relevant to that consuming audience. And the third is be fearless. There are so few companies that are willing to stand up or for anything. And I'm not talking about causes. I'm talking about saying something different. If you're starting a business and you do nothing else after this, take 15 minutes and bring up the top 10 competitors or players in your category's website and look at them, really look at them. What promise are they making in that first message on the page? How articulate are they? How savvy are they? How much of an experience is the website? How many of them look and sound exactly the same? Now, your inclination is going to be, that's how it's done, because that's how everybody's doing it. And you have to fight that and be brave enough to do and say something different so that you stand out. If you are part of the chorus, you can never be the lead singer. You have to be willing to step forward and be different in order to get noticed. Every major brand has done that in some way, shape, or form, either through their message choice, their behavior set, or their creativity in their marketing campaigns. I'm a Mac, I'm a PC doesn't talk about how long their cords are or how much faster their chips are or none of that garbage, because it's totally irrelevant. They talk about the thing that Apple stands for, which is we celebrate the contribution of the individual. One person can make a difference. One Amelia Earhart, one Mahatma Gandhi, one author, one playwright, one actor, one anything can make a difference. And they've been doing that exact same message from 1984 Super Bowl spot with the whole George Orwellian thing through the 1990 campaign of Think Different, where they literally brought out Gandhis and Amelia Earharts and the rest and celebrated them, to I'm a Mac, I'm a PC. The exact same strategy over a 40-year window. And that's what makes them who they are. So those are the things that companies that are in a position now can do to begin making their model more efficient and more effective.
Those are three of the probably best pieces of advice I've heard lately. I love that.
Gary
The
likes to
fourth
rank
one is
all of
call us and we'll help you do it.
Fourth one.
Now, if anybody
has
wants
been
to
a lot
learn
of fun.
more about you, your business, or wants to follow you on TikTok, how can they reach out? How can they get in touch?
The easiest way to find us is BrandBossHQ. So TikTok is at BrandBossHQ and our website is BrandBossHQ.com.
Hi, I'm Christy Pronto, Content Marketing Director here at Big Pixel. Thank you for listening to this episode of the BizDev Podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email, hello@thebigpixel.net. The BizDev Podcast is produced and presented by Big Pixel. See you next week. Until then, follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Threads, YouTube, and LinkedIn.